everybody. Mike Donahue here, and Brian May is alongside.
How you doing, everyone?
We, as you noticed, I'm not down in my basement. I am actually up in Alaska at Prince of Wales Island. Let me back up. Last week I was in Nebraska doing a couple schools up in O'Neill, Nebraska, and then I got on an airplane, flew to Ketchikan. They lost my luggage. That's a true story. I did find it. I got it. It had all my podcast stuff in it, so I was like panicking a little bit, but they did send it to me. But I got to fly on a float plane. Here's the plane. I'm going to show a picture of that plane. Up into the Prince of Wales area, Thorn Bay, landed there.
Nice.
And I worked all weekend with some really cool kids doing some exercises. Actually, it was a retreat. It wasn't a Christian deal. It was sponsored by the public school, actually a company called Brightways. And they do this thing called Flight Club. And these kids, I've done it 3 times now, they come in and they learn life skills. Most of these kids have had some really traumatic, or in the middle, actually, of traumatic childhood experiences. And so the adults up here just do a wonderful job with helping them understand their value and also understand who they can trust. Just give them some life skills and things like that. So I've been doing that all week. And now, and then this week, I'm going to be doing the school, specifically traveling around the island and speaking in specific schools. So I'm excited. I'm up here in Alaska.
Awesome.
And Brian and I are going to do our podcast anyways.
So Mike, in honor of you being in Alaska, I am drinking coffee from my moose butt coffee cup. So
perfect. I think I saw that moose actually. Or maybe that was. I'm just kidding. I need to stop. I digress. Well, listen, those of you that are watching us, do not forget to like and subscribe to this channel so you can get updates on when we're putting these things out and all that kind of stuff. So love to have you join us. Well, Brian, today we're going to be talking about basically the idea that a lot of us who grew up in the church and now have deconstructed our faith and kind of redefined what all that means, we have to go back and go, well, wait, we kind of raised our kids, a lot of us, in this dogma, in these rules, and now there's some repercussions of that. I know I'll speak for myself, and I know you're going to do the same, but we have raised our kids in this ideology, and now my kids are coming back and saying, hey, but wait, what was this about? What was that about? And, it has prompted some really good conversations with my own kids. I talked to my son today, and he was reminding me, it was kind of funny. He was reminding me of, Dad, he goes, you wouldn't let us watch Harry Potter, but he goes, but then you let us watch 24, which was like murder and, like really gory, people dying and all that stuff. He goes, but we couldn't watch Harry Potter. So that was all part of that whole thing, just teaching them, these were the rules of the church. You couldn't watch Harry Potter, but nobody really, cared about the other stuff. So, Brian, what's your take on all that? I know you raised 4 boys, so.
Yeah. First of all, let me just say I'm really proud of my 4 sons, Cheryl and I, my 4 sons, and where they've grown to in their lives and how they've developed. And but raising them in that environment, I'm sure. I'm not sure. I know for sure caused them some challenges. One thing I'd like to do, though, is I'd like to start at the end, because if you're a parent, or if you're a child of parents, if you're a child of parents, I guess that's axiomatic. But and you are in this kind of a thing, or you raised your kids like I did, in this background. Some of the things I've been able to look back and I guess practice some kindness to myself was to say that, my wife and I have talked and we've said, given our backgrounds, it's no wonder we ended up in a church like that. And we can talk about that on another podcast sometime, might be a good topic. That we were doing the best we could with what we knew. We loved our kids. We were doing the best we could. Of course, like all parents, we made mistakes, and some huge ones, like trying to raise them in that environment. But that's what we're talking about today. But last of all, we got out. We get out. And our kids have seen that, and they watch that process. But back to your original question, raising young people in that kind of environment, looking back on it, let's just say I don't recommend it. It is, it, there are so many things that are counter to good, solid, healthy human development in that environment. And if you think about it, number one, it's very authoritarian. You don't question authorities. You don't question the rules. And the way that's enforced is if you question authority, then you're questioning God. We've talked about that card so many times on this podcast, but you're questioning authority, you're questioning God. And maybe your soul is in jeopardy, right? Terrible thing for a young person to have to grow up. There's so much shame because if you do this or you do that or you think this or you think that, man, tisk tisk, naughty naughty, God's not happy with you, we're not happy with you. And a lot of the things that were levered as shameful were natural, normal things that human beings go through. There was so much guilt because at the end of the day, kids are going to do what kids do. And so instead of being open about it and being able to have healthy conversations about those kinds of things, it was hidden. And when you stuff and you hide those things, you create trauma. You create guilt. Guilt is a horrible thing. Guilt is a horrible thing to lever against a kid. Guilt is a horrible thing to introduce in trying to raise someone in any sort of human relationship, but especially with children. And the last thing I'll say about it, there were so many things that were rules-based that were not based on anything that made any sort of cognitive sense. They were just rules, and you obeyed them. And if you would question them, no one could give you a reasonable answer. And we can talk about some of those things if you'd like. But kids are young people. I want to quit calling them kids because they're young people are very perceptive. From an early age, I think they can pick up. I mean, they've got pretty good BS detectors, and when you say XYZ and XYZ doesn't line up or make sense, they're going to ask questions about it. And if all you have to give to them is, well, because that's the rule, then they aren't going to grow up learning how to think critically, how to make good judgments. They're probably going to wind up angry and bitter, and they're not going to trust you or maybe trust some of the people in their life that they should trust. Because as we've talked about before, I mean, it's great to get counsel. It's great to have advice. It's good to have wise people in your life. But those people aren't there to tell you what to think. They're there to teach you how to think.
Well, that's the rub, is that
Right.
they don't. They teach you, what to think, and
Yep.
they give you the script, right? The thing I used to hate hearing, from pastors or just anybody Christian that's trying to push that dogma is you should know better. Well, what do you mean I
Yeah.
should know better? Am
Yeah.
I born knowing
Yeah.
all these things just because I grew up, listening to sermons? I know better. I
Yeah.
mean, why would I know better? I don't know better unless you make me better, unless you help me understand
Right.
the why. Like, let me understand the why. Walk me through the process, right? And I think, in talking to my kids, I think that's where later I started getting smarter about that. We went through this whole thing where I didn't like them watching certain TV shows, and partly, and my son pointed this out to me today. He said, "Dad, partly because we know you didn't like them. Like I'm just not a sci-fi guy. So the Harry Potter stuff was a personal preference as well as a social construct in my church, right?
Right.
Pastors' kids didn't watch that show, didn't watch those movies, and they even had protests against them, and they would burn the books and stuff. All that mess, and so we all knew where the church stood on it. But me personally, I didn't like it, right? So so it wasn't hard for me to enforce that. But there was things like like I said earlier, like the show 24, and then my son always makes fun of me because I had him watch that movie, The Green Mile, and it has some pretty intense scenes in
Yeah.
that with demonic spirits and stuff. And he's like, Dad, like I was traumatized. And I just wanted him to watch it with me because I didn't want to be bored,
Yeah.
sitting there by myself. So yeah, there's such a disconnect on
Yeah.
the morality of things and versus the rules and the image management, right? There was just taboo things in the church world that you couldn't touch, so, and they were very very much understood by everybody and our kids as well. And when they did, like you said, when they asked questions,
Yeah.
you villainized the question asker, right? You villainized that person. You
Yep.
didn't go, oh, that's a good question. Let me explain that. No, you villainize them. What? How
Right.
dare you ask that question? You should know better.
Yeah.
And that's shame and that's coercion.
Yeah.
That's not teaching. That's not mentorship.
Right. Yeah. It's funny you bring up Harry Potter. We practiced that bit of insanity in my house as well, just because it was the culture, right? It's because you were supposed to do it. Um, and I can remember one day one of my sons came to me and he told me he was going to play Dungeons and Dragons with his friends, and I was like, I mean, we were horrified, right? Because oh my God, Dungeons and Dragons. And he pushed back against us, which to his credit, I mean, he was strong. He pushed back, and at first we were dogmatic. No, no, we're not going to do this. And finally, we went to the church and we started asking pastors, saying, "Okay, so what's up with D&D? Why do you have an objection to it?" And we began to read things, and and nobody had an answer, Mike. I mean, nobody had an answer, and we would look and we would try to read things, and other than a bunch of superstitious bullshit. Can I say bullshit? Um,
Yeah,
um,
good. I'll say it too. Bullshit. Okay, we're good. We're even now.
there we go. There was really nothing grounded there, and so he convinced me to go with him and watch he and his friends play the game. And I came away thinking like, okay, there's nothing here. It's a role playing game. Nobody's going to get hurt here. Um, and kudos again to my son for having the backbone to say, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. I'm going to push back on what you're saying. And I'm glad he did.
Yeah. Well, kudos to you for listening to him, because some parents in that world that we live in would push back even harder and draw the line and then alienate their kid. And you didn't do that. And I know, Brian, somebody's going to come on there here, and I welcome you too. I'm not telling you not to, but we're going to get some Dungeons and Dragon people that are against it. They're going to call it slippery slope. They're going to say it's an
Yeah.
imagination game, all that kind of stuff. Well, my answer back to you is before you comment to us on this stuff, pray about it and ask God if you're telling me I need to believe the way you believe, or are you encouraging me to go back to God and to listen to him myself? You did all the hard work, Brian. You did the heavy lifting. You I'm sure you prayed about it and you experienced it, and you got if you got there and it was evil, and you felt in your spirit that this wasn't the right thing,
Yeah.
you had the ammunition now to push back to your son. But you went and you went, you know what, this really isn't that big of a deal. I don't know why they're making a big deal of it. So anyways, back to that person who wants to email us and comment. Again, don't push your convictions on me or anybody else.
Right.
Give me the privilege of process, just like I
Yep.
want to give my kids the privilege of process.
Right. And I'll just tag on the end of that ask yourself, is your conviction, your opinion, Mike and I talked just a few minutes ago about convictions being based in reality, and if it's based in superstition, it's not really a conviction. It's just a belief. It's an
Fear.
opinion.
It's fear.
It's fear. It is fear.
Based on fear.
And people are. I mean, they can have that. I don't really care. But I think that's an important question to ask. There is so much superstition behind all of these things that, again, young people see right through those things. They're looking for facts. They're looking for reason. They're looking for a reason why. Now, we've all dealt with kids that are just going to argue with you to argue because they're pains in the neck. But that's not what we're talking about here. That's not the norm. The norm is that we owe our young people the ability to learn how to think rationally, to think objectively, to make decisions for themselves, to understand things. I mean, we were treated like, even adults, as adults, let me tell this story. We were treated like 2-year-olds. Like, so 2-year-old walks into your kitchen, the stove is on, they reach for the stove. What are you going to do? You're going to grab their hand and you're going to say no. You're not going to give them a lessons in the physics of heat and all that kind of stuff. Or I think we were talking earlier, and I was talking about, if you're at the dog park, or you're walking down the street and your 2-year-old starts to run up to a strange dog, you're going to grab them and you're going to say no. You're going to protect them against that. But as they get older, you're going to teach them how to approach a dog in a way that is safe for them, and that there's reasons for that. That's based in reason and reality. So in all of my 35 years at Bellevue Christian Center, we were told that you drink alcohol and you're on God's bad side. You're probably going to go straight to hell. And in all those years, the only time I ever heard a reason for that was, or any sort of like pretend rationale, was that, well, the wine Jesus drank wasn't alcoholic, which is, I mean, just do a little research,
Okay.
boys and girls. Okay, grapes were created to ferment, and there was no way to have unfermented grape juice in Jesus' time because there was no refrigeration. If you fast forward to the 80s, there was a pious Methodist preacher named Welsh, yes, of Welch's grape juice fame, that found out how to pasteurize it. But that was a little, if I'm looking at my calendar right, that's timeline right, that's a little past Jesus' time. But anyway, that's the kind of thing. It was a personal opinion that someone was trying to push on other people. And when we do that to our kids, we put them in a difficult situation where they have to deny their internal voice and feel like they can't talk to us about those things.
Right. In this day and age, you can't get away with that because someone's going to get on Google and they're going to look that stuff up and do the research and they're going to debunk that
Yeah.
bullshit. We say
Yeah.
it again.
Yeah.
Because that is bullshit. And again, alcohol. So I'm on this side of it where I don't drink, but it's my personal conviction. And I wouldn't put that on anybody else. I know people who drink, who are good people, who are Christians. They love God. They'll have a glass of wine, whatever. I don't even care what they do. Because it's their business and it's their relationship with God. Okay, the reason, I'll just be honest on this podcast, the reason I don't is because if I have one, I have 8. So that's not good for people or me. And so I don't do it. And I had to come to that conclusion the hard way, that I just can't have I'm too weak. I like it too much. And bad things happen when I drink. So I just don't.
Yeah.
But that's my personal conviction. And I don't put that on anybody else. And I'm not going to come up with some stupid explanation of Jesus' drinking habits in the Bible to confirm that. Because that's
Right.
all fear mongering
Right.
and pushing your, trying to justify your personal conviction. That's just my personal conviction. If you have a problem
Right.
with it, shut up. It's none of your
Yeah.
business, right? And I'm not going to push it on anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly right. And as a parent, obviously, if your 5-year-old comes to you and wants to, crack a bottle of Jack, you're going to probably. So.
Although that would get him to sleep. I'm tempted. Yeah, have a glass of beer.
So, but
Pretty sure my parents did that.
Yeah, but if you extrapolate to that as a parent, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I was in my late 20s when we had our first kid, so I was a little older than most people are. But we took him home from the hospital, and I'm like, no, wait a minute. I got no idea what to do here, right?
Right.
You learn it as you go along, and you make mistakes, and you learn from those mistakes. Nobody is a great parent when they start, and so. But what you do is you become better and better and better at parenting. So everyone makes mistakes. But I really believe that most healthy people want the best for their kids. And
Yep.
what what that church culture taught us was that the best for your kids was for them to be very controlled, for to use any means necessary to keep them in line, for them to be convinced that that they were under your authority, and if they came out from your authority, then they were in danger of being damaged by the devil or something. And again, there's that fear and there's that manipulation, and there is that pressure not to question things.
Right.
And as parents in that environment, I believe we were bullied into denying those natural impulses we have to be good parents, to want to raise healthy human beings.
Right. My
Um,
son actually said that to me. He said, "Dad, we knew that you had a mandate." He just said it to me a half hour ago. He said, "Dad, we knew you had rules that you had to go by because you were a pastor, and some of this stuff was reflecting. It was your job. Like if we what looked, if we had Pokemon cards or Harry Potter or some of these taboo things or you know like hide and go. I mean, I'm not hide and go seek. Halloween, trick or treating,
right,
things like that. That we would, it would reflect on your job, and it wasn't necessarily your conviction, but it was like that was going to affect you, and
right,
we knew that and that's what you called bullying. I absolutely think that's true.
yeah,
We were coerced into having our kids look a certain way, be a certain way, and our kids felt that. They felt that,
hmm yeah.
and I had to apologize to my kids. And I think unless you want to say something else about this, I want to kind of go into that a little bit. And what do you do now? Like, what do you do now to your son, your daughters, your sons? How do you approach that? What like I want to talk to the parent out there that raised their kid in this environment, and then you went, oh shit, like you know what, I screwed them up. Like
Yeah.
what do you do now? And so let's chat about that.
Well, when Cheryl and I began to, and I hate to use this word because it means a lot of different things, but when we began to deconstruct, we did it very much in the open in front of our kids. Matter of fact, we were probably too open. We probably processed too many of our emotions in front of them rather than teaching them how to process these emotions. But we were honest. We were honest about what we were going through. We would talk to them about, this is the way we used to see things, but this is how we see them now. And this is why. And you said the most important thing is you go to your kids and you're humble. You say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we were in this. And like I said at the beginning, I mean, it's no wonder that given my upbringing, why I wound up in that place. And we were trying to do the best that we could, but we got out. And in that getting out, we tried to do our best um, to communicate to our kids our regret. Regret's not a great word, but for lack of a better term, our regret for having raised them like that. Um, and you know what? They know we were doing the best that we could. They knew we did the things that we did. We They knew we loved them, okay, and that we
And
cared about
that's
them.
really, yeah, and that's probably the most important thing.
Right.
And I would say that I don't think, I think it's good that you process in front of them. Maybe you cross the line here or there, I don't know, but I would rather err on that side
hmm
than pretty it all up and let them see this polished version of that. I
Right.
think that when you're deconstructing or whatever, however you want to call, whatever you want to say, when you're coming out of that fog and you're seeing things clearly, it hurts. It bothers you. It's like I remember having a conversation with all of my kids, and I asked them straight up, how did that hurt you? How did that bother you? Like what did that do to you in your
Right.
faith? And I got different answers from, because all four of them are different, with their different personalities and stuff. But I loved hearing it because even though, they joked around about it too. They were like, Dad, you didn't let us watch that Raven show because it had witchcraft. And like they would sneak and watch it,
Right.
and I look back at that and I go, Mike, what the flip, dude? Why were you so, and I laughed about it. Like they laugh about it. They make fun
Yeah.
of me. Like, Dad,
Yeah.
you were like so, crazy about that stuff. But or if there was a sex scene or like or somebody would cuss in the movie, I'd go blah 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 blah, which is whatever. But they would do it now. Like if we're watching a movie and together, they'll go blah blah, and they'll make fun of me. But I think having that conversation, if you're watching this and you feel some guilt or you feel some regret over the way, ask that question.
Yeah.
Ask your son, your daughter, hey, how did me projecting this this dogma, these set of rules on you, instead of letting you process those rules, how did that affect you? And then shut
Right.
up and listen to them talk.
Right.
And it may bother you. I mean, it may hurt you.
Yeah.
It may deepen that, that feelings of, man, I really messed this up. But what it's doing for them is it's giving them permission with you to air that stuff out. And you know what? Kids are resilient. They will forgive you. What they
Mm-hmm.
won't tolerate is exasperating them by, and that's what I think that scripture means when it says don't exasperate your children.
Yeah.
I really think it means to trap them in a way of thinking, to
Yeah.
trap them in a dogma.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Don't exasperate them. Open them up. Let them talk. Let them be free. They're going to say
Right.
some things that are probably going to bother you. So what?
Yeah.
We all grow. We get older. We figure it out. They're going to
Yeah.
come back later and say some things that are more, in line. Maybe not. But at least it's
Right.
honest, and it's an honest relationship. And that's what you want. You want honesty over purity or the perception of purity. It's really not pure.
Mm-hmm.
It's the perception of purity.
Right.
Is what the church wants. They want you to look a certain way.
Yeah.
And exasperating your children is making them look a certain way, but not being a certain way. And
Right.
that's, yeah.
And just to go back and hit a few points that you made, when you said shut up, and part of shutting up means that you're going to own it, right? You're going to own what they say.
Yes.
And if they say something that was, wrong, or you don't identify with, or, if they attribute motive that wasn't there, it's not about being right. It's about them being heard by you, them knowing that you love them no matter what they say, and them being able to express their feelings and get them out in the open and get them out into the air. It's not an argument. It's not a debate. You're not trying to, discover the scientific, factual truth of everything that happened.
Right.
You're trying to
Right.
have an honest conversation, and that's love.
Right. And I think the thing that you said that's really important is that you're trying to do the best you can. Be kind to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I have this thing now that I'm kind of going through with my kids is I'm just realizing that, I have to detach myself from the ego of wanting it to look a certain way. I want them to feel a certain way about me. You know what I mean? Like I have to just go, I'm okay with them
Right.
struggling right now at times. And they all go through different things. Like a couple of my kids right now think I heard this today actually on a reel. It said, our kid, and we've mentioned this before, but kids go through this process where they idolize you. And then when they turn 13, because their hormones get crazy and they get independent and the social world becomes real important, they villainize you.
Yeah.
And then at some point, they humanize you.
Yeah.
And that's where I want to be
That's
in
really
my
good.
life with my kids. I don't want them to villainize me. I don't want them to
Right.
idolize me, but I want them to see me as a human, a guy that, yep, I did some things wrong, but I also did a lot of things right. And deep down in my heart, I really love them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the truth. I really do. And I know you, Brian.
Yeah.
I know you really well. And I know you loved your kids. And I know Cheryl. She loves those boys.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, at the end of the day, that's what we got. That's all I got is love.
We got. I do have to say one thing, in case any of my sons watch this, but I'm pretty sure they'd have got where they're at on their own, even if we'd have stayed stuck, And I think part of that has to do with who they are. I think part of that has to do with what you mentioned before, the just proliferation of knowledge and the internet. But I mean, I just don't want them to think I'm taking credit. Like I let them out, into the promised land. But I'm just covering my butt right here. So that's not
That's very
advice. I'm
smart.
just doing that.
That's very smart. But I'll say it's because of me. My kids are the way. No, I'm just kidding. No, no, ditto. My kids, they're
Uh,
so much smarter than me.
yeah,
It's almost like they
yeah,
led me along. Like my kids were ahead of it before I
yep,
was. And I want to maybe give a little teaser on this, but I was talking to Rick Cole, who's a mega church pastor out in California, and we're going to have him on the podcast here. Jeannie Mayo went and tried to take over their church, basically. Well, I shouldn't say that, but it's probably true. Um, anyways, I talked to him a couple times, and he said that to me. He said that my kids, I think specifically one of his sons, got there sooner, and he began to see it through his eyes. And I think that's pretty humbling. And those of you that are watching this, if maybe your kids have tried to talk to you about some of those things, and you've held on to that dogma because it's like you're normal and you're your identity and you can't let go of it. I would say really, listen to them and listen to the heart of what they're trying to say to you, because it's probably they're probably ahead of you a little bit.
yep,
And I know my kids were.
yeah. No,
So
mine as well. Mine as well. Um, can I address someone else here for just a minute?
sure.
So we've talked indirectly to parents, to young people who are in this situation. I'm going to clean this up a little bit, but I wrote Mike an email last night, and I just want to say this.
Yeah,
If
you need to clean that up.
yeah,
I
yeah,
like it.
yeah, I did too. But if you're a pastor or a person in a position where you think you have authority, you think you have some right, some anointing, some mandate to prescribe how another person lives their lives and to force them to live according to your standards, number one, knock it off, because you're a charlatan, because no one has that power. No one has that authority. Number two, get down on your hands and knees and beg your deity to forgive you of your pride and your arrogance, and ask for the grace to pull your head out and straighten up your own twisted, broken, deceitful mind. Because that's what it is. I'm not trying to be mean. And if that were me, three more fingers. But we've got to stop doing this to our children. I mean, this world, Mike knows this better than I do, better than anyone I know. This is a hard world to grow up in. This is a hard world to grow up in. And young people don't need this extra burden heaped upon them and levered against them. They don't need this abusive, destructive power brought into their lives. They need people who love them and value them, who have wisdom, that will lead them and that will be for them. And you know what? If you're anything like this, what I read, you're not for them. You're for you. Don't kid yourself. You are
Yeah,
for you.
you're for the show.
Yeah.
You're there for the show.
Let's be
And
for them.
I don't have any time. Yeah. Yeah. I don't have any time for those people in my life. I just spent the weekend with some of the most broken human beings on the planet. The last thing I was thinking about pastors that I know that are still pushing this bullshit. And they're the last people on the planet that I'd want them to meet. Like I wouldn't want those precious kids to meet those people who proclaim to be men and women of God. They would hurt them. They wouldn't know what to do. First of all, they wouldn't know what to do with half the stuff that they tell you. And then
Right.
second of all, they just give them some religious script, and that's the last thing
Yep.
those kids need. So yeah.
Yep.
Well, hey, this has been a good podcast, and would love to hear your comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and then share this, because I'm sure there are parents that people that that raise their kids on this, this whole ideology stuff, and need some help with it. And we want to, if we can offer help, we will. So,
Yep.
all right, Brian.
All right.
You have a good week. I've got schools up here in Alaska, so next week I'll show some more pictures of Alaska. I just
Awesome.
want to make people jealous.
Awesome.
I just want people to be jealous of my life.
You know what? I am already jealous, but just make sure, go out and find the moose.
Yes, find the moose. And don't forget to support the Huskers. Go Big Red! Go Big Red! Big Husker fan.
All
All right.
right.
Have a good week. See
See
you later,
y'all.
guys.
Have a great one. Bye.